And so tonight, we begin the first episode of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the 21st century version. In 1939, Frank Capra made the instant classic Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, starring the marvelous Jimmy Stewart as the new senator in town who took on the powers that be in a clash of good and evil, with the good guy winning in the end. If Frank Capra were making today's version of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the new Mr. Smith would be a prosecutor, a special prosecutor, whose target would be Donald Trump. And no doubt, just in case this version of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington plays out like Frank Capra's, 50-year-old movie stars in Hollywood tonight might be calling their agents to line up for the part of Mr. Smith. Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed Jack Smith today to take charge of 2 federal criminal investigations of Donald Trump and his associates. Congresswoman Donald Trump, also known as Marjorie Taylor Greene, tweeted, "Impeach Merrick Garland." That's how the news was received in Trump world. Donald Trump issued a written statement saying the Democrat Department of Justice had nothing except Trump haters, so they just appointed a special prosecutor to go after me further. Disgraceful, exclamation point. Donald Trump is outraged by the appointment of Jack Smith. In an online interview with Fox, Donald Trump, who has never heard of Jack Smith, described him this way: now they take some guy who hates Trump. And in a uniquely stupid comment that no other president would be capable of, Donald Trump said this about what is now Jack Smith's investigation and possible prosecution of Donald Trump. Quote, "I am not going to partake in it. I'm not going to partake in this." Then he is going to have to flee the country and ask Vladimir Putin to shelter him because, as Donald Trump discovered when the FBI showed up at his Florida residence with a search warrant, it is not up to him what he partakes in. It's now up to Jack Smith. Like Jimmy Stewart's Mr. Smith, John L. Smith is from small-town America, upstate New York, north of Syracuse. He got his college education nearby at the State University of New York at Oneonta, and then rode down the Massachusetts Turnpike all the way to the end for 3 years at Harvard Law School.
Mr. Smith is a veteran career prosecutor. He began his prosecutorial career in 1994 as an assistant district attorney with the New York County DA's office. In 1999, he became an assistant U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of New York, where over the course of 9 years, he prosecuted matters ranging from gang murders of police officers to civil rights violations. From 2008 to 2010, he served with the International Criminal Court, where he supervised war crimes investigations. In 2010, Mr. Smith returned to the Justice Department to serve as chief of the Public Integrity Section, where he led a team of more than 30 prosecutors who handled public corruption and election crimes cases across the United States. In 2015, he agreed to serve as the first assistant U.S. attorney for the Middle District of Tennessee, later becoming the acting United States attorney. Most recently, Mr. Smith served as a chief prosecutor for the special court in The Hague, charged with investigating and adjudicating war crimes in Kosovo. Mr. Smith will begin his work as special counsel immediately and will be returning to the United States from The Hague. Throughout his career, Jack Smith has built a reputation as an impartial and determined prosecutor who leads teams with energy and focus to follow the facts wherever they lead. As special counsel, he will exercise independent prosecutorial judgment. Given the work to date and Mr. Smith's prosecutorial experience, I am confident that this appointment will not slow the completion of these investigations.
Here is how the Attorney General described the 2 criminal investigations of Donald Trump and his associates that Jack Smith will be supervising.
The first, as described in court filings in the District of Columbia, is the investigation into whether any person or entity unlawfully interfered with the transfer of power following the 2020 presidential election or the certification of the Electoral College vote held on or about January 6, 2021. The second is the ongoing investigation involving classified documents and other presidential records, as well as the possible obstruction of that investigation, referenced and described in court filings in a pending matter in the Southern District of Florida.
The person currently supervising both of those investigations and possible prosecutions is Merrick Garland, who is also in charge of supervising the 115,000 people who work in the Department of Justice, including the 35,000 people working at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the 34,000 people working in the Bureau of Prisons, the 9,848 people working in the Drug Enforcement Administration, the 5,400 people working in the U.S. Marshal Service, and on and on and on. Merrick Garland has Justice Department employees answering to him all over the world, working 24 hours a day. And now, Jack Smith has been appointed by the Attorney General to spend all day, every day, concentrating on one thing: the investigation and possible prosecution of Donald Trump. Jack Smith is not replacing someone else who was in charge of both of those investigations. There was no dedicated prosecutor in charge of both of those investigations, and now there is. And Donald Trump is afraid of that. That is correctly deeply disturbing to Donald Trump and his acolytes. Merrick Garland insisted today that the appointment of Jack Smith would involve no delay in these investigations, and there is actually the possibility that at certain points in the investigation, it could speed things up because Jack Smith can make the decisions that previously had to get in line for the Attorney General's attention, which, as the department organizational chart shows, is scattered literally all over the world. Merrick Garland has a civil rights division to worry about every day, an antitrust division, a tax division, an environment and natural resources division, and Jack Smith doesn't. Jack Smith's focus is on one target all day, every day. And that target is going to have even more trouble trying to fall asleep in Florida tonight than he did last night. Mr. Smith issued a written statement today saying, "I intend to conduct the side investigations and any prosecutions that may result from them independently and in the best traditions of the Department of Justice. The pace of the investigations will not pause or flag under my watch. I will exercise independent judgment and will move the investigations forward expeditiously and thoroughly to whatever outcome the facts and the law dictate." Jack Smith, a name a fiction writer would choose to convey humility, now stands at the threshold of becoming the most famous and most important prosecutor in human history.